Awesome. Thank you, Claire. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Emily Klein. I am with the Pew Charitable Trust, and I work on the conservation science team with John. And we're going to be co-facilitating today. So I'm going to lead off, and then I'll hand it over to John halfway through. But welcome, everybody. For those of you who don't know us, you might not know me. I'm sort of new to the CMP stuff. But Pew does a lot of environmental work globally. I personally support the international fisheries and marine habitats work, and John does more of the terrestrial work, but we both are on a team that does science support across our campaigns. So whatever research and science needs that our teams have, we're there to sort of support them and help out. So that's the other reason why we're pretty invested in conservation standards and communities like this one. So I will go ahead and just get us started. I think our agenda today is first some on conservation in practice, then we'll do a CMP business, and followed up by other member updates. So I think, Varsha, if you're ready, I'm ready to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Varsha Suresh, and I work at Foundations of Success. And I have been coordinating a grant that we received recently at CMP from the Moore Foundation sometime mid last year that is funding 4 different initiatives who you'll be hearing from today, in addition to another project that was a CMP initiative previously. So I'm just going to share my screen here and pass it over to Nico. So all the initiative teams, just an FYI, I will share the time check in the chat. So if you could just keep an eye out for that. And I'll be sharing my screen. Feel free to just say next and I can go to the next slide. Over to you, Nico.
Yeah, thanks, Varsha. Good to see you all. And thank you for letting me go first. I'll have to fortunately jump off after my presentation because I left my family at a Mayfire celebration and they are kind of waiting for me to pick them up again. It's 9 o'clock in the evening here. So yeah, policy impact. We have a fabulous learning initiative, as many of you know. In that initiative, we have been and are still focusing on learning how civil society organizations can actually better influence environmental policy. And yeah, we do that through basically evidence collection from different sources. I'll talk about that in a second. And are trying to publish that in different formats and share widely with the community. As many of you might, next slide, Varsha, might know, this is the team that we have been working with for, I think, 2 years by now. We are, yeah, different colleagues from FOS, from Conservation Evidence, the Nature Conservancy, Pew, WWF, and also Euronature. A diverse group, all people that think a lot about policy and or deal a lot with evidence and process that or collect it and so on. And what we did as a team is we tried to lay out what are the key learning questions that would actually be interesting to answer to improve how we engage with policy and also to advise both the community of organizations and people that do on an ongoing basis environmental policy work and or that are more conservation-oriented teams and basically identify a need to work on policy in their strategy selection, but then struggle to analyze that deeper and to understand how to approach that. So these 2 purposes we had in a way. And what we've done, next slide, Varsha, sorry, is we've ran interviews, 19 semi-structured interviews, but also looked at published evidence, looked at 200 relevant sources. A lot of that work has been done by the colleagues of Conservation Evidence. And we basically tried to cover a lot of different contexts. We had a diverse group of people that participated in the interviews, lobbyists, NGO representatives, researchers, legislative advisors, and so on. So different contexts that we're trying to cover. And next slide, we collected all that data and then, of course, analyzed it. We used MaxQDA to code all the information to basically to find different themes in our data of course, on the one hand, to relate that to the learning questions and assumptions that we had and wanted to test. But on the other hand, to find also new themes and new ideas of importance. One thing, for example, to highlight here is that over time, we found that the relevance of policy windows and how they actually open and the influence of them on the effect that engagement strategies can have is super important. So that topic gained a lot more relevance now in the emerging materials than we originally thought. We then used Obsidian to actually integrate all the data and create cross connections between different topics and so on that we saw. And yeah, basically ran a cross analysis and also visualized a lot of the data using that tool. Next slide. And then we're in the phase now of compiling all the learning on the one hand through figures and plots. So we're using what we call ziggurat plots. You might know that from the Conservation Learning Initiative that we presented at one point as well, to basically understand, is the evidence that we have collected supporting some of our core assumptions or not? It's also called the Balanced Evidence Assessment method. If you want to know more about that, you can check that out, I think, using that link. And on the other hand, we're producing, to the extent possible, figures and trying to find quantitative ways of actually showcasing some of the qualitative information. And other than that, of course, create narrative around the qualitative data that we have. Next slide. And what emerges from that, we originally thought we would publish an entry on the Conservation Learning Initiative website, kind of a new topic to complement the topics that are already there. In the process, the core team found that it would be more helpful for the community to have something a bit more hands-on. So we changed that deliverable to navigating to basically a practitioner guidebook that we call Navigating Policy Engagement. And yeah, we're landing on these 5 chapters. On the one hand, policy process, windows, and engagement, but also assessing the policy context, planning the policy engagement, then the role that evidence plays in all of that. So when is evidence use, how useful, and how do you need to package it so it is useful, for what purpose? And also, how can you measure success of policy engagement efforts? You see there is a fairly strong overlap, of course, to the conservation standards there. And then lastly, the sharing. So we shared at 2 occasions already. There's a Pew webinar that we gave end of last year. And also we had a session with many colleagues that are on this call as well at the recent rally in Chile. And we're, of course, going to share, once the guidebook is done, the guidebook, and hopefully also we'll call for another webinar to take you a bit deeper into that. But you can already access, on the one hand, the material from the rally and also the recording from the Pew webinar if you're interested. Thanks so much. If you have questions, of course, we're grateful to see them, and we'll respond as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Nico. Just another plug that if you have any questions for the speakers, please do go into that slide deck that Claire shared the link to and add your questions here. And if you don't mind adding your name, that way they can make sure to follow up with you with answers. Thanks again, Nico. I think next we have the behavior change team. Kate from Rare, I'm going to pass it to you.
Hi, everyone. This is Kate Mantle from Rare. I apologize. I seem to be having some video issues that require a restart, which is not ideal given that I'm presenting. So you'll just have to look at my headshot for now. And I am representing the behavior change group. We are working on integrating behavior change principles and practice into the conservation standards. So next slide, Varsha. I'm representing this amazing group of humans, including Nick and Varsha from FOS, Judy from the Moore Foundation, Kara from the Walton Family Foundation, myself, Philippe, and Maria from Rare, and then Kelly from the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. I think many of you have also been participating as part of the larger behavior change working group that Kelly and Katie Williamson from Rare have been leading. And that group has been providing lots of input as well into the work that we're going to be talking about today. So next slide. So how we fit into the CMP strategic plan. There's actually many places, but I think the most relevant ones to talk about are encouraging collaboration, sharing, and learning, particularly advancing and sharing guidance and tools. Next slide. And then also developing and promoting data standards for conservation. So we're really hoping to provide some templates and guidance there. Next slide. So what does that actually mean? So here's just a quick example to put this in context. So here's a sort of more standard, typical theory of change. We have this example of shark finning campaigns with the direct threat of illegal shark finning and hoping to protect sharks. If you go to the next slide, and maybe advance through Varsha so that the rest of the factor chains come up. Yeah, there we go. So this is what we would maybe look at if we've kind of behaviorized, as Nick likes to say, the theory of change. So incorporating all the different behavior levers and psychosocial states into the strategy here. So we have 6 different behavior levers: make me, nudge me, norm me, sway me, tempt me, and show me, that we're trying to build out different tools and strategies for to help make this process easier in terms of thinking about behavior change, incorporating it into your strategies. Next slide. And so one of the things, so just zooming in there a little bit, when we're talking about intermediate results or the threat reduction outcomes, those are often behaviors. Next slide. And what we really want to bring to light and really have people think about is what is actually driving those behaviors. And so that's thinking about the psychological and or social context that drives the behavior. Next slide. And this can be a variety of different lenses. So we have the social science lens, the behavioral science lens, and then also like the psychological state. And those are like the different lenses that could show up in that psychosocial state box. Next slide. And that's where the behavior levers come into play in terms of thinking about how are the motivations and barriers that are driving behaviors? How are we thinking about them? And then how can we make it easy for people to design program activities around them to drive and influence the more sustainable or desired behaviors that we're looking at? Okay, next slide. Yeah, you flip through. So things that we've been working on, the recommendations for the changes to the conservation standards. So that work at the moment is complete, though we may have another round by the end of this project. We are also currently working on the catalog of behavior change relevant situations and strategies and theories of change. That work is in progress and is taking the shape of a microsite to the CMP website. The updated review of behavior change frameworks with a crosswalk to the conservation standards. So that work has done and will also be integrated into the microsite. Next one. And then the last deliverable for this thread of work is a plan to promote the adoption of the materials, and that will come later this year. So Varsha, I don't know if you want to just take a quick peek at the to the microsite just so you can get a taste of where we are. We have a draft template for the levers through the rally session, and in the weeks following, we've collected feedback from many of you on what would be most useful here, and we've been spending the last month really incorporating that, and we'll be launching and testing the microsite very soon. Yes, we can see it, Varsha. Thank you. If you just want to scroll down a little bit. So this gives you a flavor of one of the levers, sway me. So we're having guidance for the theory of change, generic pathways for how you might incorporate this lever, Sway Me Emotional Appeals is a little bit different because we've highlighted some generic examples for different types of emotions here. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, yeah, just some tips and tricks about when this might be useful, common traps to avoid, and then different specific case studies that from the literature with activities. Okay, I only have 1 minute left. So maybe we could switch back over to the slide deck. Yep. And then the next steps about how you can get involved. So we are going to be doing some testing once we have the full microsite up and would love volunteer testers. And then we will also be developing additional case study theory of change to add to the microsite. And we have some funds to involve other CMP member organizations. So this is the pre-announcement of that is coming soon. And we'll send out more information about how you could submit a case study and the sort of what we're looking for there. And yeah, I think if you have any questions, please add them to the template and put your name in there so we can follow up with you. Thank you so much.
This is Nick. Could I add one more thing? Because I'm going to practice a behavior change incentive here. So using the incentive lever here, I just want to emphasize that there will be funds available. We're going to have a competition for people to be submitting their ideas for case studies, and the winning ones will then be paid to actually develop them into full case studies. So hopefully that will provide the right motivation to get the psychosocial state and the behavior that we need to have happening in this case.
Great. Thank you so
How did I
much,
do, Kate? Did I get that right?
Nick.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, material incentive. There we go.
Awesome. And as always, if you have any questions for this team, please use the slide and add your comment in these white boxes. Moving on, next we have the COMET team. And I think Vanessa from WCS will be talking to us about it. Over to you, Vanessa.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'll be nice to see all of you and meet some of you. I'm presenting on the COMET project, which is the Conservation Monitoring Effectiveness Techniques project. This is a Moore Foundation initiative, and it aims to develop a repository of industry standard, field-proven, cost-effective methods for monitoring, including methods based on traditional knowledge. The goal is to have this repository be for practitioners to find effective, cost-effective monitoring methods that they can use directly in the field. And it will include both natural and social science methods. You can go to the next slide. So our project team consists of myself, Rachel Newgarten, Gautam Surya, and Xiao Li. There is a larger ecosystem of folks that are working on this project, including a steering committee, which includes David Wilkie, Will Beal, and Kara Stevens. We have an advisory group that is comprised of marine and terrestrial biology experts, governance experts, social science and human well-being experts, traditional and indigenous knowledge experts, and technology and AI experts. So that we have this advisory group. We have traditional knowledge holders that are part of the traditional knowledge consultant Xiaoli's team and group and network. And then we have obviously the practitioners we're hoping to gather a lot of information and data from, as well as from the rally, which a lot of the rally attendees are from diverse backgrounds. So we have that CMP community and their networks, and really the project is hoping to expand into a much larger ecosystem. But the rally was a great place to kick off this project in terms of letting the community know about it and also get a lot of valuable feedback from our rally session. You can go to the next slide. So how we see this fitting into the CMP strategy is the advance and share guidance tool strategy, specifically looking at the needs for guidance and tools identified and prioritized that you can see there. Also the conservation standards and associated guidance, continually improving that piece. Then the high quality guidance and tools accessible and available. So hoping to add to that with this repository. And then support and tools that are available to enable gathering and sharing of conservation data. So this is, again, one of the end goals of this repository that will hopefully help address all of those pieces of that strategy. So yes, we had a great rally session. We had about 40 attendees. The main goals of the session were to really get feedback on monitoring methodological challenges, but also successes and opportunities. We also asked for a lot of feedback on the different types of features that people would find valuable and useful in the COMET portal, or platform rather, and gathered a lot of actual methods that we could put into the COMET project, and then also just themes that we saw throughout. I do have a synthesis of our session if people are interested in that. We did gather a bunch of emails, but if you're interested in seeing the synthesis from that, we did 3 different activities, and I have it all synthesized into a document, so I'm happy to share that with folks. We've also since from the rally been able to hire Xiao Li, who is our traditional knowledge consultant. She has a background in social anthropology and also conservation. And so she's done a lot of work with traditional knowledge stakeholders, convening groups from 50 different nations, and has an expertise in the area. And so we're very grateful to have her as our main project manager for that component of the project. And then we are developing the initial set of methods and indicators based on the rally feedback. And that will drive kind of how we go about our one-on-one conversations and networking and gathering of all of our methods, monitoring methods as we progress in the project. Next slide. So just briefly, this is our snapshot of our work plan. There are these 7 outputs for the project. You can see now that we're now in April, almost over. But this is kind of where we're at in the progress of the project. So in the next few months, we'll be kind of developing the platform as well as collecting a lot of the data, both in desk research, but also these one-on-one and networking opportunities to really try and deliver those methods, the monitoring methods that will be able to be open source and available and actually useful on the site as an end product. And throughout this project, there are a few webinars to promote the platform. So if anyone's interested in participating or wants to hear more about just the progress in general, the platform is aimed to launch March 2026. And we will share it broadly with the CMP network. So you'll get probably some notification about it, but just so you know, that's the time frame for when it will be launched. And throughout, again, there's a few different points where we have some webinars to have some more engagement with people. And if you're interested in participating in a more direct way by providing monitoring methods that you have either experience with or have knowledge of from a project, we would love to hear from you. Again, this is really a group effort. We're the project team, but it's a much larger ecosystem that we're trying to include. So please reach out to me for any individual monitoring methods that you'd like to share, ideas that you have, et cetera. I'd love to hear your feedback, and so would our team. And next slide. If anyone has any questions, obviously, please feel free to reach out. And yes, if you would like the synthesis of the rally session that we had, again, just ping me and I'll send it over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. All right, let's move on to the next one, which is the market system. I'm going to pass it to Annette.
Thanks, Sasha, and hi, everybody. Yeah, just covering off on this initiative, unlike most of the others that are funded through the Moore Foundation, this one was funded through a group called Canopy Lab with underlying funding from USAID, but we'll cover off that in a moment. And if you could go to the next slide, please, Sasha. So this is all about aligning with a framework called the Market Systems Development Framework, which, if you haven't heard of, it's has a lot of similarities to the conservation standards, but it's used by folks in the market systems development community, the international aid community, who are running projects typically aimed at poverty reduction. I've been chatting with Tom Hilton, who's on the call today, and I'll pass to him shortly, who works in this community, and we've been thinking about how do we learn from each other, talking about that for quite a few years, but this grant kind of gave us the chance to do something about all those conversations. Also worked with Andrew, who's a colleague of Tom's, working in the market systems development. And then Jill as well, who has experience in both camps, if you like, market systems development and conservation standards. So it's been a great help in sort of translating all this language and teaching me about that community. And next slide. Thanks, Barsha. So where we fit in the strategic plan, like most of the others, I think there must be some animation here. Sorry, Barsha, if you could just run it through. Anyway, not to worry. We've fit in the advancing guidance and tools section of the plan. Building out some information that we hope people can start to use in their projects. Next slide, thanks. So the rationale for all of this, in our view, a lot of the threats that we have to deal with in conservation, and that image up on the top right there, the pink shading shows all of the standard classification threats where we think their root causes lie in markets or market failures or perverse incentives or something that has sort of an economic grounding. And so to deal with the root causes of those threats, we really need to understand how those markets are working and how we might intervene. And similarly, the image below around actions, we often try to use actions around livelihoods and market incentives and the like to either change behaviour or prevent some sort of problem that is happening in the biodiversity community around local communities. And again, to get those livelihood kind of strategies working, really need to know how the market's working, how we can get the market to work in our favour. So Tom and I have been talking about that for a while. How can we in the conservation space learn from what the market systems development people know? And likewise, how can we in the conservation space help the market systems development people factor conservation and biodiversity and climate change issues into their work? So it's been a great kind of collaboration and shared learning. We got this small grant, which helped us to sort of get started on all of this, which was fantastic. Had a few workshops, and a few people on the call here today have been in those workshops where we could sort of bounce around the concepts. The timeframe was really tight, but Tom did an amazing job of producing a document that is primarily targeted at the moment to the MSD community about how to sort of factor in biodiversity and climate change into their work. So what we're doing now is trying to then do sort of the inverse of that, and how did we build out some more guidance for the CS community. And the work we're doing, we've got a workspace, the link is there, where we're starting to load up this information as we collate it. But I'll hand over to Tom for the next couple of slides, Varsha, to cover off just what we did through this grant work. So Tom, if you're good to go.
Thanks, Annette. Yeah. We'll keep it really brief. As Annette said, we were really looking to draw on best practice from both conservation and development, and to come up with tools and guidelines that were compatible both with the conservation standards, but also standard guidelines that economic development practitioners use. And so the goal of bringing both practices together to improve the way that conservation folks change the way that markets work and address some of those market-based drivers, and to really mainstream and operationalize environmental concerns in economic development programming. Next slide, please. And so the core concept, I won't go into it here, but it adapts the market systems concept that's been widely used in economic development for a long time. And that concept sees markets as complex systems, that's not just your sort of core value chain trade, but also the wider enabling environment around there. And so what we've brought to this is to say that those markets are embedded in and dependent upon natural systems, and are the source of most of the conservation threats that we face. And so the rationale being that to achieve these global goals, we need to really drive fundamental change in the way that markets work, rather than what we refer to as the sort of traditional direct delivery, train some farmers, do a bit of community handout kind of work, things that are a little bit tinkering around the edges, to be a little provocative. Whereas this would direct practitioners to the real root causes of biodiversity loss and climate change. So there's a lot more details available in the guidelines, which are out now. So you can see more details there. But Next slide, please. So coming up next, we want to continue building these links between practitioners in both fields. We're currently working with practitioners to start piloting, testing, and further developing the approach, and refining the guidelines. And as Annette said, focusing on very specific conservation standards applications. And so if anybody's interested in partnering with us, trying some of this out in your conservation livelihoods work or interventions in markets, do reach out to Annette or myself. Emails on the screen there. And yeah, as I say, we're fundraising and looking to put this into practice this year. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Vasha. Happy to take any questions or put them in the slide deck.
Thank you so much, Tom and Annette. Please do add your questions if you do have them on the slide. Last but not least, we have the IUCN CMP classifications. I think this time the focus was actions. I'm going to pass it to Claire.
Thanks, Vasha. So this initiative is also known as the most boring, geeky, and yet essential initiative to understand, organize, and share conservation data. Next slide, please. Our team and committee is made up of over 40 members. This time we're really trying to make sure that the version 4 threats and actions classifications are aligned between CMP and IUCN. The initial version, version 1, was initially a collaboration between the two organizations, but then it sort of split off for version 2. So what we're really trying to do is combine forces here, and we want to develop joint products again. So we've got an amazing committee. We've got over 35 organizations, agencies, and specialist groups from across the conservation sector, but also beyond that. So we're working with teams in the health sector and the business sector and government agencies. So we're really trying to make sure that we're collaborating with as many people as possible that can contribute to these classifications. Next slide, please. You would have heard about the classifications initiative for a few years already. It aligns with the advanced guidance and tools strategy in CMP's strategic plan, and there's a specific action specifically for threats and actions classification. Next slide, please. So excitingly, version 4 of the threats classification was published towards the end of last year. So it is accessible. There is a link in the slide deck, and I'll also pop it in the chat for you after this presentation. So the version 4 of the threats is published and accessible to you. We'll also make sure that it's uploaded and available in Marathi if you do use that in Marathi. But moving on to the actions classification. Next slide, please, Vasha. We've had a bit of a break in early 2025, but we need to reconvene our committee over the next few months to finalize and disseminate the draft actions classification scheme. So we worked really hard last year to create a draft. We need to consolidate a few more resources, and then the plan is to host a series of webinars to gather additional feedback from IUCN and also the broader conservation community. We'll then consolidate all of this feedback, describe the changes and migration paths, and then hopefully finalize and publish version 4 of the actions classification by the end of 2025. So on this slide, you'll see a link to sign up if you're interested in joining the Actions Classification Committee. Most of this work has already taken place, but we will, of course, share the draft with you and make sure that you get the invites to those webinars. You can also download and read the Threats Classification version 4. Nick, anything else to add?
I think you've covered it.
Brilliant. All righty. Thanks, Vasha.
Great.
And
Thank you so much,
feel
Claire.
free to add questions.
Yeah, please do add questions. All right, everyone, it brings us to the end of this showcase. It was great to have an opportunity for everybody to share what's been up. I hope it was interesting for you to hear all that's happening and all the possible ways you could potentially contribute. If you have any questions about the initiatives, feel free to use those email IDs that are on the different slides to reach out to the leads, or as I mentioned previously, I'm coordinating this grant, so you can always reach out to me as well, and I'd be happy to put you in touch. But with that, I will pass it back to Emily.
Awesome. Thank you, Varsha. Thank you, everyone. That was a great lightning round of very cool stuff. And now we will get into the rally debrief, and I'll hand it over to Jacqueline and Christina.
Great, thanks so much. I'll share my screen here. Okay, so I know many people who are on the call. There were many of you also at the first ever combined CCNet and CMP Rally this year in Chile, in Valdivia. So it was really an amazing event, brought together. We had about 180 people there, which was really exciting. From all over the world, nearly 40 countries were represented. I think over 70 organizations were represented. So it was just such a wonderful way to bring so many people together. And yes, we had a special appearance by some amazing dinosaurs while we were there. So just want to give folks a brief overview, and then if we have a minute, walk folks through some of the resources that are now available for you to look back to for sessions and other materials that came out of the rally. And we had a fabulous, I'll jump back to that, a fabulous local designer who helped create all of this artwork and the theme, the aesthetic theme for our rallies. So huge thank you to him. So we want to talk briefly about the different themes in the sessions. We had some wonderful field trips. We had a very energetic and exciting marketplace one of the evenings, and we were able to highlight some of our colleagues with awards and had some fabulous celebrations. So Claire's just put the link to the rally website directly in there. So a lot of things throughout these slides here as well, which we are happy to link the slide deck as well. We'll tell you to find more detail in that website. We're right towards the finish line of making sure everything's updated there. So we had kind of 6 different themes here that were represented. The first one being really focused on the conservation standards guidance and tools themselves, learning more about Conservation Standards 5.0, which is just around the corner, hearing more about climate smart conservation planning, more of the spatial and geospatial mapping, which has been kind of this, really emerging topic. Goals and metrics, as well as diving into these target health assessments. So kind of all of that spread out throughout the rally here. We've kept things on the website in these themes. However, there's one main page where you can look across all of the sessions. So just know with the actual organization that that's one thing that might help you find some of the sessions you're looking back for. For this one, we mostly were focused on kind of capacity, strengthening the network. So there was a really wonderful session on mentorship for adaptive management. And then we had kind of some smaller, more strategic conversations, somewhat more internal from the CCNet and CMP sides as well. Organizational capacity, bringing the conservation standards into organizations and how it then can align with other tools and frameworks. And then adapting the conservation standards. We have a lot of organizations on the call who use the conservation standards, but either adapt them specifically for their organization or to meet, the needs that they might have. Planning with Indigenous and local peoples, community-based resource management. There were a lot of amazing sessions, some focused around trust, safeguards, resilient communities. We had people talking about healthy country planning and different, again, adaptations and modifications to make the conservation standards more accessible and more useful for different groups. Enhancing Indigenous and local community leadership as well. So lots of great sessions here. There's, again, lots of content that people can refer back to with these different pieces. Protected area management, a session focused on 30 by 30 and protected areas, the restoration standards as a topic itself, and then even a session focused on the IUCN Green List. So please go back to these. We also have a nice bird up here, so love all this imagery. And then maybe this one kind of just continued to emerge because a lot of things fell into knowledge, technology, and skills for the emerging future. And because there are so many emerging topics, it really became a big part of the rally. AI, some of the behavior change work that you just saw, COMET as well, you just saw a highlight on that. They had a really robust, amazing session at the rally. Building evidence, again, a lot of these different funded initiatives here, how different types of technology, applications, data collection ways can help with your conservation work. Again, a deep dive into the Marathi tools and support, as well as scaling, which was also one of our plenary sessions at the rally as well. And then navigating policy engagement. So a lot of things that were able to kind of move throughout the rally as standalone sessions, but then kind of themes that continued throughout. So we had a few different field trips here, and these group photos turned out fabulous. We can also, we'll add to the website where folks can add or view some of these images. Some hiking field trips, as well as we also had a whole group who had a nice river cruise down in Valdivia, and I heard some fun interactions with insects and all kinds of stuff. The Tools and Innovations Marketplace, we had 18 different booths and a lot of amazing things that people brought from all over the world for us to share with one another. I won't go through all of these, but we had, again, some of the sessions also were able to host booths to deep dive, like CS 5.0. We also talked more about things like SMART, right? And here's Cleo right here. More about the markets, conservation by design, the map that we all know and love, sharing your story, taking photos, getting people to give interviews and other pieces like that. So it was very lively, it was very fun. And then we have amazing people, some of them on the call here, who received awards. You can see all of them up here. And it was just such a nice way to give back a teeny bit to the people who put so much time and energy into supporting and building up this community. So we'll make sure that some of that is on the website as well. Last but not least, thanks for adding in some of these photos of our celebrations. It's always nice to learn more about the place that we are hosting our events. I think one of the biggest pieces of feedback we got was just how integrated and how much this rally was able to use translation services and really make sure that we were able to kind of acknowledge that we were in a place with a lot of Spanish speakers, a lot of amazing culture, and really highlight how wonderful that was. So here's our group photo. You can see the beautiful river in Valdivia. And on the next slide, we'll also show you some of that, more celebrations. This is the dance party if you haven't been to one. It's a highlight. And there was an eclipse. About 20 of us or so got up at 3:30 in the morning and went out to see the eclipse. I assume maybe, is this a Justin picture? Thanks,
Yeah, it
Justin.
is. I had to use the telephoto to get this one out.
They're all Justin's pictures.
Photos that weren't with our smartphones. So thank you so much for the rally planning team and everyone for participating. It was really amazing to have everyone together, and we're excited to do it again in a few years. So here's the participants by region. You can see that Latin American and Caribbean was about half of our rally participation, which was amazing. And again, we had about 40 different countries represented here. Christina, Claire, anyone else have anything that they want to add?
Thanks, Jacqueline, for the great summary. And, I would just like to add thank you to all of you at CMP for this great collaboration. And I feel that, we have, at all the past rallies, we have closely collaborated, but we never hosted one together. So thank you for all the good work. And I hope that you can also have some reflections within CMP of what you felt worked, that, should we do this again into the future? What did you get out of this collaboration, and what could we do differently to make it even better from your side? So a deep gratitude for each of you. And I think, the evaluations give us great information. So we'll be sharing more about that. But the overall sense is that everyone really enjoyed it, and we achieved the objectives of contributing to shared learning and advancing our collective practice of conservation. So thank you.
Thanks, Christina. And I'm seeing some gratitude and excitement in the chat as well. And a lot of that goes back to you setting up such an amazing foundation for us to be able to even, join in on and contribute to. So keep putting anything in the chat. I see a lot of fun things in there. I do want to just, while we have a minute here, open up the website so folks can see where they'd be clicking into. We wanted to separate out these resources and presentations just so it was really easy for you to find final products instead of more of kind of the schedule or pieces while we were there. So if you're looking for final products and things that came from the rally, this is going to be the place you want to go. And again, if you're not sure where something sits, they're all listed here. And then as you go into each theme, right, you can continue to dive into a little bit more detail. Some of these different sessions even have a few different resources in them. So we wanted to make sure that they had their own page. If you were leading, if you were participating in something and there's resources that you aren't finding in here, please reach out and we will track them down, or if you have them yourself, we will make sure that they get uploaded. So you can reach out to the CMP info email. We'll drop that in the chat. Okay, and then again, more other details kind of for participants coming into the rally can be found throughout here. But if there's something missing, let us know. We will also try and add a few more details that came from the evaluation, as well as some easier ways to access some of the photos and other things like that that may not be as session specific. Okay. Well, I'm going to stop sharing here, but we do have a few extra minutes, so I will keep it open for comments or questions about the rally, and then maybe we can even, Emily, I'm not sure, maybe we can even leave a few minutes if people have questions about the presentations.